Good afternoon, everyone. So we have all our panelists already joined in. So we'll begin with our today's discussion. A very warm welcome to everyone to yet another panel discussion being organized by ICM. And at the outset, I welcome our JS, Sri Abbagani Ramu, who will be doing the initial remarks, and all our esteemed panelists. Siddiqui from IOM, Poe Mumbai, RSLGC, and some migrant workers who will be joining us today as well, and our moderator for the day, Mr. William Goff from Migrant Forum Asia. I just want to mention up front some of the basic ground rules that we all should try and follow so that there is a smooth discussion without any disturbance while the panelists are speaking. So I would urge everyone to keep their audios turned off while a person is speaking so that there are no disturbances in between. If you face any connectivity issues, then you may also turn off your video as well so that at least the audio part is clear. We have a dedicated slot towards the end for discussion and Q&A. Additionally, you may also use the group chat option to type in your comments, suggestions, which I'm sure can be seen and are visible to everyone. And the panelists may take them up when they are responding. So without any further ado, let me welcome Jay, Sri Abbagani Ramu, to give initial remarks.
Good afternoon and warm welcome to the moderator and panelists and the participants of today's panel discussion. Let me first welcome Mr. William Boyce, Regional Coordinator, Migration Asia Forum, Ms. Peppi K. Siddiqui, Regional Thematic Specialist, International Organization of Migration, Mr. J.K. Saw, Protector of Immigrants, Mumbai, Mr. R.K. Jain, Rajasthan Skill and Livelihood Development Corporation, and the participants. Warm welcome. Thank you all for joining today and this very important topic. We have been doing a series of such webinars in the last few months, and of course every subject is related to migration, but this particular subject we are focusing on the grievance redressal mechanism, especially in the destination countries. So that is an important part, especially in the context of COVID. As many of you know that most of the workers and the people traveling got stuck because of sudden announcement of lockdowns in various countries, and most of them have become jobless, lost employment, and they have been struggling. So that has added to the troubles of the migrants who have been already under stress. So for this, the Government of India is the Ministry of External Affairs, is the nodal agency to take care of the needs of migrants before they leave and after they leave and during their stay in the destination country. So we have basically two mechanisms to take care of their needs. One is when they before they leave India, that is in the origin country, and the other set of mechanisms are when they reach their destination country. So in case of origin country, we have a various mechanisms, particularly to address their queries, grievances. We have one online portal called Madat. Madat is a little word for help in Hindi, Indian language Hindi. So that is that any kind of queries related to migration after they reach or before they reach, so they can put their queries and they will be directed to the respective authorities, and they will get back and they will be addressed then and there. So in addition to this Madat, we also have Pravasi Bharatiya Seva Kendras. That literally the translation is the Migrant Service Center, the Diaspora Service Center. So there are they provide various counseling assistance and troubleshooting and addressing their queries. And in addition to that, we also have this pre-departure orientation training. It is a compulsory mandatory for people who are going to certain countries where the immigration check has been required. So that includes the training related to the free and legal migration, how to avoid the difficulties when they land in a foreign country. So it is a one-day-long training program to give the various aspects of migration, safe and legal migration. with respect to destination country redressal, we have our embassies and consulates across the world, and they have separate wings, consular wings, to take care of the needs of the migrants. And of course, this particular aspect has been given special emphasis in the last few years. This has been the focus in the government of India to take care of the needs. And of course, there is a 24 hours helpline, and there is also a separate fund created to take care of the emergent needs of Indian migrants abroad. Basically, they can meet the expense of boarding and lodging. If somebody got stuck in a foreign country, there is no way, and they exhausted their savings. So the fund can be given to help the people who need some boarding and lodging till they get back to the country. And of course, there are some medical needs which they come to. So those assistance also being given. And of course, somebody unfortunately passes away, the mortal remains also will be brought back. So these are the mechanisms which we have in the destination country. But there is also an insurance scheme, which is a compulsory insurance scheme for every migrant to go abroad, especially those people who are in the blue collar workers going to some certain countries where the immigration check is required. In those countries, we made this insurance compulsory. So the insurance covers wide areas for the benefits of migrants, including if somebody fell sick and they lost job and they have been forced to leave the job, and in those cases they can claim insurance, and of course also to come back to India in certain conditions. So these are the mechanisms which we have. But as I said, that pre-departure orientation training is an important component which really will be useful for the migrants before they leave. And of course, there are many other aspects which we need to study and discuss in addition to what we also already have. But those things can be discussed during this seminar, and we will be happy to hear from you to get new ideas to improve our present redressal mechanism. So with these few words, I thought I will stop myself here and welcome all the views, and we'll be happy to hear and listen from all of you. And I heard today there are some representatives of migrants in the part of this discussion. I request them particularly to take additional responsibility to what they are also already doing, to take care of at least 5 migrants every person, to teach them about the legal migration, what needs to be done, and also encourage them to be in touch with the embassies of India and consulates of India, so that they know the benefits the government has for them. So it is more important to educate that only formal mechanism like Government of India and the embassies may not be able to reach each and every migrant. So migrants can also become part of our effort to reach this knowledge of the safe and legal migration that will become helpful for the common migrant who may not be knowing all the policies and facilities available for them. So it will be very nice to hear from all of you, and I welcome. I think my colleague, Consul General of India from Dubai, has joined. So let us welcome him also. So it will be nice to hear from him, because he is representing the India abroad, and that is basically taking care of the destination countries. So it will be happy to know what exactly the mission is doing rather than hearing from the mission. So with these few words, I welcome all of you and look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. We'll now move on to our panel discussion. The panel discussion today is moderated, as I said at the outset, by William. He is the regional coordinator of Migrant Forum in Asia, which is a network of regional network of grassroots organizations. He is the former chairperson of Global Coalition for Migration, which is a coalition of regional and international network of migrant associations. Over the last 20 years, he has been at the forefront of international advocacy efforts, engaging in influencing international and multilateral processes to promote right-based migration and development policies. I can go on about him, but we are more keen to hear him talk. So I will now request William to moderate the discussion.
Thank you.
And a very warm welcome to CGI Dubai, who has also joined us.
Thank you so much, Surbi, and thank you, sir, for that introduction on the India's role that it plays both in supporting its migrant workers, and I like the way it was started, the whole spectrum approach from country of origin to country of destination. I think that is how we must continue to perceive this, as a spectrum, not as different spots in different moments in time, but as a spectrum of protection. And that was well laid out in terms of how India has put in mechanisms in place. We all live in a very difficult time, a time that none of us 1 year ago none of us would have believed that the world would have come to this stage, the world would have come to its knees, kind of thing. These lockdowns and the uncertainty that we currently have, as you know. Many thought things would open up in July, then they said August after summer, then they said the fall, and now the latest is maybe sometime next year. So there is so much of uncertainty, both in terms of deployment, in terms of return, in terms of employment, and this is something that we grapple with today now on a day-to-day basis, on a daily basis. What is also interesting, what we have experienced is that never before have our systems been tested in the way COVID has tested. So whatever infrastructure we have in place for migrant workers have all been tested, and that is a good moment for us to take a pause and look at this, how it has been tested, how it has held up, and how it could be improved, or what new measures could be taken. And a further dimension of this whole discussions is around bilateral, multilateral processes that kind of exist in terms of protection of migrant workers in countries of destination, from origin to destination. And I think this is crucial for us in looking at protection in terms of the cooperation among states in the course of migration governance. And for that we have today then, as our topic says, migrant support systems in destination countries. We've got an excellent panel, and we will start with that. We've got to start off with, we have Ms. Pepi Siddiq from the regional thematic specialist, who is, we have the Consul General of Dubai, sorry. We have the Consul General of Dubai, we have Ms. Pepi Siddiq, we have J.K. Sau, and we have R.K. Jain. And I will, and each of these has played a critical role and continues to play a critical role. Let me start with Ms. Pepi. She is the Senior Regional Migration Protection Specialist of the IOM. And she's got a lot of experience in writing and in advocacy strategies, and on networking and coordination of activities. She's played a crucial role in Bangladesh's humanitarian response to the Rohingya refugee issue as well. She's done a good stint with BRAC as well, a well-known international organization in Bangladesh. So she brings a lot of grassroots ground experience to her work, and it will be great to listen to her on what her experience in this area has informed her. We have then Sri Jayan Kumar Sau, who is also the Indian officer, who is an officer of the Indian Telecommunication Services of UPSP. He has served in various capacities up to director level in the Department of Technology, and this communication plays a very key role, key place in addressing the issues of migrant workers in terms of how they are taken up through the process of communication and followed through. So it will be interesting to see how communication, and particularly in this time of the COVID, how information technology and communication have played a vital role in addressing the migrant issues. And finally, we have Rajesh Kumar Jain, who is the Deputy General Manager at the Rajasthan Skill and Livelihood Development Corporation in Jaipur. Skills is going to be the big discourse as we come out of COVID. As we come out of COVID, this is going to be the big discussion that will be part of all migration governance discourse. And it is important for us to look at how this is going to play a vital role both in repatriation, reintegration, and in continual deployment. We also have with us two of our migrant workers who are with us as well, Virendra Kumar and Abdul Kadir, who will also take the floor to share with us their own experiences. So without much ado then, let's start this conversation. And I'll start with you, Penny, to say, if you could start to tell us what in your experience as IOM, I know you all have done a lot of work in capacity building as well, in terms of working with missions in being able to address grievances of migrant workers, how to put up systems. But what are you seeing now that would be helpful for us as we take this pause in the sense of in this time of COVID and look at some of our systems in place that are in place in destination countries? Well, what do you see has worked? What could work better? Thank you. Floor is over to you, Pepe.
Thank you, Mr. Goyes, and thank you to ICM for organizing this very, very timely exchange of ideas. It's certain that India already does a lot in this space, and I think the one thing, and Mr. Goyes, you mentioned this as well, but what the crisis has really highlighted is that there are still a lot of gaps in assistance to migrants in vulnerable situations. And, it's not that IOM has all the answers either, but I'll be happy to talk a little bit about what we've seen working and where we've seen some of the gaps emerge. Before I move on into that part, I just quickly wanted to talk about the magnitude of the challenge that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought about with assistance to migrants. I mean, we've certainly not seen this type of mobility, both return migrants as well as migrants stranded in countries of destination, in a human memory, in a lifetime. And the COVID-19 related policy implications, all the mobility restrictions that came to place really created a whole set of new challenges for migrants, while also exacerbating the existing vulnerabilities that migrants already had. The travel bans, the border closures left a significant number of migrants stranded, including seasonal workers, temporary residence holders, international students, migrants who had not been particularly vulnerable in the past. Migrants that travel for medical treatment, who, had longer term visas, as well as beneficiaries of assisted voluntary return. Globally, IOM estimates at the moment, so even after months of returns already happening, that there are still at least about 2.75 million migrants stranded globally. And I mean, this number is quite conservative. It's very, very difficult to gather this data. But out of that number, at least 1/3 are from the Asia Pacific, and majority of these would be within the Asia Pacific or within the Middle East, so stranded within this region. The migrant status of migrants makes them extremely vulnerable when they are stranded, because often, the stranded migrants have lost their jobs in countries of destination and are not eligible to receive any sort of social services or government assistance, because they are now, in effect, irregular or undocumented migrants in those countries. And so they really have a highly increased risk of surmounting debts and becoming destitute. And this additional debt is also something that we really have to look at how to address, because that's not only something that affects the migrant in the country of destination, but that's something that they will bring back with them to the home countries as and when they return. And this hardship that the migrants are facing, their inability to work, to have access to social services, often they have very poor access to information around mobility, around services that are available, and that makes them very vulnerable then to be further victimized and fall prey to smuggling and trafficking networks, which is then a whole different kettle of fish in terms of the kind of services that we need to be available there. At the same time, we've seen that the services that are usually available in the countries of destination for victims of trafficking, whether it's shelter homes or counseling staff or interviews or even labor inspections, those have fallen off or been reappropriated to other things because of the COVID-19 response. And so the services that used to be there are not really there. We also see that organized criminal groups have been very, very quick to readjust their modus operandi to meet the needs and meet, to do what needs to be done. And so, for example, taking advantage of the reduced capacities of the state agencies to go after them, or moving the trafficking or the sexual trafficking of migrants more online where the enforcement is not so strong. So we see that there's a very strong crime element that's looking to exploit the gaps that have been exposed by these mobility restrictions that are not always fully coordinated. So the kind of more traditional mechanisms that IOM has to offer, and IOM works with governments to offer these. I mean, one of the main tools that we use is our assisted voluntary return and reintegration programs that can run from any country of destination back to the country of origin, often negotiated together with the government. And these offer anything from pre-departure counseling, and in this case, it's not pre-departure orientation, it's more counseling to the potential returnee, saying, you know, here is the package of assistance, these are the types of assistance that we can give you back in the country of origin. You know, here may be the reasons why you might consider voluntary returning, actually assisting in the journey, whether it's by booking tickets or other means of returning to the home country, providing psychosocial counseling, providing access to health services, and of course, really, really importantly, also looking at then pretty comprehensive reintegration package upon return to the country of origin, because often migrants who return through these programs are very vulnerable, likely to be in some level of debt. And so should they return home without any additional assistance, it's unlikely that they will be able to remain for very long, or that return is very sustainable. And so we need to look at how to support, whether it's with economic reintegration or entrepreneurship or skills training, something that allows the returning migrant to land on their feet. We also see that bilateral labor agreements are a very good place to start in terms of trying to put in place some of these safeguards for migrants already before the migration starts. And that's something that IOM is increasingly supporting, of course, together with ILO as well, and trying to incorporate things like discussions around financial savings for migrants or dispute resolution procedures into the bilateral MOUs already, so that these mechanisms are in place should there be a crisis or a need for large-scale return. Such mechanisms are in place. For example, I think a good example is one between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Philippines, where they have already negotiated a 24-hour assistance to the domestic workers, for example, into their bilateral agreement, as well as a facilitated issuance of exit visas for the repatriation of domestic workers when need arises. Some of the newer tools and areas where we see good return on investment includes a lot of using of social media and virtual tools. So, for example, in Germany, IOM uses this virtual counseling tool called MIRA, or Migrant Registration Application, that allows us to, it's almost like a client management system in the sense that once a migrant has been registered on this tool, it allows a counselor or a case manager to communicate with the migrant through SMSs, through emails, to send out information, whether it's on COVID restrictions or health requirements or whatever. And it's very kind of low management tool to allow mass communications as well as one-on-one communications with migrants in need. We've also been exploring a little bit further the use of cash-based interventions, and this is something that is often used in emergency or humanitarian settings, where looking at providing cash to the beneficiaries instead of tailored assistance such as non-food items or specific kind of water sanitation related items, to give the beneficiaries cash and say, well, here is a package that you can help yourself with. And this is something that we've now explored a little bit, for example, in Libya, trying to assist the stranded migrants there with access to cash vouchers or e-vouchers while we're waiting to be able to repatriate them and have a more permanent solution for that situation. It's very difficult for governments, and one of the real challenges for governments and has been during this COVID times has been to, how to identify all the migrants who are stranded in this situation, because it goes much beyond the traditional people who may have migrated through the kind of manpower agencies known to the government and known to the consular staff in the embassies. And so we've seen, for example, a really good use of diaspora networks. Mongolia was able to reach out to thousands of migrants in very vulnerable situations in various countries, both in Europe as well as in Middle East, through their embassy networks and through the embassies discussing with the diaspora organizations in those countries. And they had created already kind of a vulnerability matrix through which they were not only able to find out all of their stranded nationals, but also to start ranking them in order of who requires assistance first. And this was something that they were able to do jointly with the diaspora network, so that they were able to then, because the limitations to return flights to Mongolia were quite severe, and so there were only so many that could be assisted, and this is still ongoing. The other really good practice that we've seen is, of course, from the Philippines, where the government has this Overseas Workers Welfare Fund that is created, and the workers contribute to it themselves, which then steps or comes into gear when there's a worker who needs assistance to return to the Philippines, or where they're in a vulnerable situation in the country of destination. And that's something that the Philippines have been able to utilize very effectively in this case. All of the workers who have contributed to this fund have then gotten back in touch with the Philippines embassy saying we need assistance returning. Of course, the challenge here is that in normal times, the fund assists about 30,000 migrants a year. This year, they have already received almost 200,000 requests for assistance. And so we're talking tens of millions of dollars in assistance. And, even these type of funds can be depleted with this magnitude. And so, something to think about. We've seen multiple missions use Facebook very, very effectively in terms of reaching out to migrants, stranded migrants, in terms of pushing out information, but also managing information that comes back into them and using them for awareness-raising campaigns. Again, IOM Germany, through their Facebook account, was able to reach up to 130,000 stranded migrants in Germany. And then they received over, I think, 7,000 direct interactions in terms of people wanting to have a discussion and understand better where they could go to receive assistance. I think also I would just like to briefly touch on the role of the private sector in all of this, because it was mentioned already that in many cases we've seen the employers, the factories, making the workers redundant and not really following through in terms of, is the worker able to return back to their country of origin? Are they able to remain in the country? How are they able to support themselves? And there is increasing kind of legislative framework around the private sector being responsible for the workers, around the kind of modern slavery regulations, around the types of assistance that a company is expected to be able to provide to the migrant worker. And I think this is a conversation that's really important to have going ahead, and include the private sector on the platforms and the forums when we're discussing assistance to migrants, and see how governments and the private sector can work together more effectively to ensure that a migrant, for example, who no longer has a job, can be assisted to return to their country of origin safely. And IOM, of course, has a few tools around this where we look at ethical recruitment and ethical labor supply chains, and making sure that migrants are recruited safely and remain in employment in a safe and respected way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pepi. Thank you for that. And I like that you focused on returns, and repatriation. And I think that's one of the biggest issues within this time of COVID kind of thing. The number of repatriations we have seen, and we have also seen the chartered flights, the support that the Indian government has given to so many migrants coming back kind of thing. I would like to, even as we look at that, it would be great to look at the question of return. And if it's okay, if I can come to the Consul General of India just to make a connection there, His Excellency Dr. Aman Puri. If I could just come to you first, because I know since Pepi spoke about return, I'm wondering, how do you, when you come back in the repatriation process, since we are looking at redressal mechanisms, I'm sure within the groups of migrants coming back, many would have lost their jobs and have not been paid or have not gotten end of service benefits and things like that. We ourselves are running a whole campaign on that actually at the global level. So I'm wondering, how do you ensure that there is access to return, even in a there is access to justice, even in a repatriation process? So migrant workers who in this time of crisis don't come back to that situation of death, Pepe, that you were talking about and things like that. And at least they don't come back empty-handed as well. So I'm wondering if we can move straight away to the Consul General of India to say what kind of measures in this time of COVID particularly and at other times you take to ensure that migrant workers have this access to justice or redressal mechanisms available to them. Sir, if I can ask you to come in at this stage.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir. Yes. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So just to give you a little bit of a perspective from Dubai. So the Consulate of India in Dubai, along with the embassy at Abu Dhabi, obviously is responsible for the welfare of 3.4 million Indian nationals who live in the UAE, one of the largest expatriate group of Indians living anywhere in the world. So we estimate that about 65% out of this 3.4 million is the population of the blue-collar workers, whose welfare is something which we are focusing on right now. And just to give you a perspective, during the COVID period, starting March, and once the flight started, supporting the repatriation process from UAE, about 550,000 individuals have traveled back from UAE to India, and about 150,000 have traveled from India to the UAE. So we are already seeing some of the individuals who lost their jobs, had to travel to India, were able to come back because, they were called back by their employers. Now that is one part of the story. The other is, of course, as you will appreciate, that COVID, not only being a healthcare crisis, has also devastated the global economy. So we are also seeing a lot of companies going bankrupt, companies closing their business, and there are those concerns where workers are waiting for the end of term benefits, they are waiting for their salaries, they are waiting for other benefits, and they are in a situation where they're not able to continue to live in the UAE because they don't have a valid work visa, because that arrangement is over and now they enter into that zone of being an undocumented worker, so to say. And of course, without a job, it is not difficult, it's not going to be easy to sustain a living here in the UAE. And therefore, yes, that's a very valid question. We have a mechanism which is called the Pravasi Bharatiya Sahayata Kendra, PBSK, which was the first of its kind in the world. It is funded by the ICWF, which is the Indian Community Welfare Fund, which is a fund which we create out of the consular services which we extend to all Indian nationals. So it is a fund generated from the communities for the welfare of the community. And we have been very liberally dipping into that fund in this last 6 months in every aspect, supporting repatriation, supporting legal counseling, supporting psychological counseling, and of course also provision of food and accommodation for the workers who lost their jobs. We have also been working very closely with the Indian diaspora here to support that process. And specifically addressing the question you asked, so we have the means where within the UAE there are these pro bono clinics where the workers are able to go and file for their rights, file a case against their employer for their salary, for their end of service benefit, etc. It's not an easy process, I must say. It's a complicated process, as you can imagine, because if we are able to get a mediation either through the consulate or through some other sources, we have seen that it can work very well, because it can be a win-win situation where the employer is able to satisfy the former employee and give some amount of compensation, and the process can be completed in due time, also enabling the individual to look for alternative employment. However, there are situations where people had to go back, they did not have the means to continue staying here. We do have a provision where they can give a power of attorney to the consulate, and we can file the case on their behalf and through our empaneled law firms, of course. And that is a system which we are trying to strengthen now. So what we are hoping to do is that any blue-collar worker who's lost the job and who feels that there is no other way except filing the case in the appropriate court of law, we would be supporting the process of fighting that case from the funds within the ICW. So that is approach which we have. We are also seeing that alternative employment opportunities are, opening up, especially because the UAE is allowing some amount of opening up of the economy, as you're all aware. And going forward, we are hoping that that will really be the solution, because at the end of the day, you'll appreciate whether in India, whether in the United States, the UAE, now it's very easy to expect that the employer should do everything. But the point is that let's be realistic, where some of the employers simply don't have the means because, they are actually going bankrupt and closing shop. So at that situation, it becomes difficult. And we have also seen a problem where sometimes the court does give the verdict in favor of the employees or a particular employee, but the execution of the court order is a big challenge. Now that, again, as you know, you'll appreciate that's a challenge in all economies, in all qualities. So these are the challenges which we are going through. But we did have a very, I would say, an open mechanism to support and to communicate with the individuals, with the Indian nationals. And about 2.5-3 months ago, we started this service that we are available 365 days of the year. So our office is open every day, and even on holidays and on weekends, our official is available for a few hours. We have about 5 to 7 phone lines which are working. 3 of them are 24/7. 4 lines are working during the daytime. We have a means of actually sending your query, your grievance through a single window e-helpline redressal mechanism, which we aspire to respond to within 24 hours, and that has been working quite smoothly. Of course, during the time of COVID, when there was too many travel restrictions and a lot of issues were there in terms of supporting the travel to different parts of India. As you know, UAE and India are very well connected. Pre-COVID conditions, we had 75 flights a day. And I must add that, within the last, even in the last 3 to 4 months, we have enabled almost 25 flights a day to different destinations in India from various airports of UAE. So I would say that at least on the supply side, we've been able to take care of the availability of seats, at least for people who need to get back. But coming back, just echoing the words of some of the earlier speakers, that basically, coming back to India, again, we have to appreciate that it's not going to be easy for someone who has lost a job in UAE to actually get a new job in India immediately, as you'd appreciate. So I think while we are obviously going to be extending all support in every which way we can as a diplomatic entity here in the UAE, within the limitations which we have, and obviously we work very closely with the UAE authorities on supporting this process. But yes, eventually one has to have a balanced view that at the end of the day, it is what it is, and the economies have been devastated. So eventually we all would need to work in the larger scheme of things in the revival of economies, and we need to obviously as countries work together. Of course, India is the largest remittance receiving country in the world. Just to give you some figures from UAE, the annual figure is close to 70 to 80 billion US dollars. So that's the kind of remittance which flows in from UAE back to India. So I think it is very important for me to just register, my gratitude and my congratulations and my words of support to all the members of the Indian community, especially the blue-collar workers, who actually do an amazing job, not only for themselves, for their livelihood, supporting their families, supporting the whole economy of India. And I think kudos to them, and they are able to actually send back the lion's share of their earnings back home to support their family. which is an extraordinary thing. And of course, we must also appreciate the fact that UAE has always supported the movement of workers from India, and that is the reason why today we have close to 2.2 to 2.4 million Indian workers, blue-collar workers here in this country, and they are obviously, able to sustain their own livelihood, support their families, etc. And that is how we engage with them. So I'll probably come in again if there is a specific aspect you'd like me to focus on.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that. And it is true. I mean, with such a big community in the country, I can imagine the challenges that you have as well. And there is only so much that the mission can do, and then to have the cooperation of the community itself is a big thing. And I've seen that in a number of states where the Indian community works hand in hand with the embassy, kind of thing, which is very useful and helpful. I particularly appreciate this whole notion of the power of attorney. We have just been engaging with the Philippine government on this, and of course they've always kind of had this power of attorney thing. But it is interesting that we are currently looking at cases in Malaysia and in Lebanon and Jordan, where the Philippine government has actually refrained from repatriating workers who have cases pending until the power of attorney is not given, kind of thing. So it's very good to see that the Indian government is also taking this approach of securing the power of attorney to be able to process claims of workers. I must say there are some other thoughts that are prevailing at the moment within the international community. And it is that businesses will always get a handout, even in a time of crisis, either by the state or by the big banks to re-establish themselves, kind of thing. So they will get the helping hand. It's the migrant workers, like you say, the blue-collar workers who might have a big challenge, and they come back empty-handed, kind of thing. So some of the ideas out there are maybe the state can put up the money up front and collect from the business later after the crisis when it has re-established itself, and over a period of time. So it's like a loan that the state gives the employers to pay back, let's say, in 3 years or 5 years or whatever. I mean, that is something that they could negotiate. But to ensure that workers are not the ones that carry the biggest part of the burden, kind of thing. I think this is something that would be worth looking at and exploring, particularly with Gulf states and countries that have enough reserves, kind of thing. But I'll come back to you on that, and maybe the floor will have some questions on that as well. But let me go to the POE from the ministry, Mr. J.K. Sau. I see you have a presentation to make, so please go ahead.
Namaskar. Thank you, Mr. Williams, and Namaskar, Joint Secretary Ramu sir, Honorable CGI Dubai, and all the esteemed panelists. CGI Dubai has already listed the huge efforts the Indian mission is involved in the mitigation of immigrant grievances in Dubai and all the ECR countries. Now, I will present my today's analysis of redressal mechanisms of immigrant grievances in a different perspective with respect to what we have been doing as the Protector of Immigrant Officers at Mumbai. And I am supporting with some very few facts and figures just to have a proper comprehension. So I will start with my slides. So basically, what we have been doing, we have been receiving around 300 to 400 immigrant grievances per month. That is an average pre-COVID times. We have been receiving, and basically the source of registering grievances has been through E-migrate, Mother, PBSK, walk-in and phone calls, emails, all sort of inputs. And if we say to have the amount of idea of the numbers involved, we have been involved in the rescue, repatriation, compensation cases resolved in the last 3 years is 22,000, and out of these more than 10,000 immigrants have been repatriated in the COVID period. That is all free of cost, and we have filed in the last 3 years around 250 FIRs under violation of Indian Immigration Act. against the illegal agents. Now, and it's a challenge when we have been receiving a large number of immigrant grievances. So how to address to the most needy person. So that is why we have been following a priority-based grievance resolution model. And first priority is given to the repatriation of female immigrants because majority of them goes through the illegal channels, and it's a very big challenge to basically, first of all, have a traceability of the foreign employers for securing the exit visa, and then afterwards, then arrange for the repatriation in consultation with Indian Embassy. Then second priority is given to the repatriation of general male immigrants, those who have been basically either in this also a lot of all sorts of immigrants are involved, whether they have been staying in the camp or whether they have followed with the foreign employer, they have moved out of the camp, and whether to arrange proper shelter for them, and then engage the recruiting agent for an employer channel, and all these things get involved into this. And then third priority is basically resolving salary dues, contractual issues. So we are giving third priority because it can take some time, so it's not a very urgent time dependent issue. And then last priority is given to the service charges resolutions. Now these are some few numbers. As you can see, repatriation out of 17,000, 10,000 has been into the COVID period. And then compensation of Pravasi Bharatiya Bima Yojana, we have been able to compensate 10 lakh rupees death insurance, accidental death around 250 cases. Then outstanding dues, all these things, and then roughly the figure comes around to 22,000. Now I will just go through the main challenges in resolving the grievances. Basically, if until unless we are able to trace the whole foreign employer details, the recruiting agent details, it is very difficult to resolve the immigrants issues. So if we go by the data, ECR category migration, for which the data is mandatorily captured in the E-migrate, is only around 30 to 40% of the overall immigration. Now, to secure the exit visa, foreign employer detail is required because ultimately foreign employer is already going to give you the exit visa. And now, for that, basically the biggest challenge is to have the data captured, how to capture the data of ECNR immigrants going on visit visa and subsequently converting into employment. And now this is most prevalent in post-COVID times. In UAE is now offering visit visa, 3 years visit visa, also 5 years visit visa. Also, they have come up with some paying certain amount of fees, you can get a 5-year visit visa. So these immigrants, when they go on a visit visa and get their visit visa converted into employment, they are not captured by our data. So they are devoid of all the welfare schemes and mechanisms of Government of India. Then immigrant going by pushing. Pushing is a basically common terminology wherein the immigrants, although having an employment visa, basically show the visa which is shown at the airport is a visit visa to third country. So he is having all the legal travel documents, but that employment visa details are not captured. So I'm moving to the part 2 of the challenges. Now, since there is no details of the foreign employers for ECNRs and those who have gone to the illegal channel, how to secure the exit visa. And if there is a dispute with the foreign employer, same foreign employer is again requested for exit visa, which is a contradiction. Now, another issue is economics involved in this. When the immigrant has not completed his contractual period, and when we want to secure his exit before the contractual period, the foreign employer generally asks for the visa cost to be compensated. Now, visa cost, the amount of visa cost comes around to be 1 lakh to 2 lakh rupees. It varies for the different countries. The average cost is around 1 lakh to 2 lakh rupees. So now who is going to pay for it? The matter stuck here. So then it delays the whole repatriation process, the rescue process. So one of the probable solutions which we have been working on this, that whether to cover this repatriation cost and the 6-month salary under Pravasi Bharatiya Bima Yojana, either as an add-on to the basic policy or clubbed together in the basic policy. Another issue what I have discussed in my previous slide, that post-COVID scenario, proper employment visas are not issued because of several reasons. So as a biggest challenge is to how to capture the details. Like I've already told, UAE has offered the concept of 5-year visit visa. One way is to have, what we can think it of, and I'm just giving a probable solution, is to when it is converted, this visit visa is converted into employment visa, at that time we can ask for a recruiting agent to register their details into the E-migrate. So with that, we will be able to capture the data that is most important for resolving the issue. Just giving you figures, it's an old figure, but it will give you the idea of percentage of ECNR categories, what is being captured. So in 2016, around 5 lakh, I'm speaking about the Mumbai Saudi consulate. Number of employment visas issued in 2016 was around 5 lakh. Number of emigration clearance was around 1,65,000. So that is 30 to 40%. So rest 60% comprises of mixture of ECNR categories, visit visa and all those things, those who are not going through illegal channels. So another issue is that we have to include death due to COVID in the Pravasi Bharatiya Bima Yojana. Presently, only accidental death is covered. And although we are having a comprehensive compensatory mechanism as a form in the form of ICWF and few other funds in destination countries, as a part of suggestions, the best practices what other organizations follow. There is a very good example as a welfare mechanism available for Indian seafarers. There is a Seafarers Welfare Fund Society in India where the licensed RPSL agent, that is basically equivalent to recruiting a licensed recruiting agent for emigrants. They are called recruitment and placement of shipping ships. So the RPSL agents contribute 500 rupees per seafarer per month in this fund, and loans and death compensation are basically provided from this fund. Pension for retired seafarers, COVID-19 compensation, and medical expenses along with the family member. Educational scholarships also are being provided. Another concept is what they are having is a national union for seafarers that is recognized by International Transport Federation. That is, and they provide it's a good concept like what we have been basically experiencing since we have initiated the PDOT concept, and pilot PDOT had started from Mumbai and Delhi. So emigrant going abroad and departing from Delhi and Mumbai, even if he has to stay at one night at these metros, it will cost around 2,500 to 3,000 for a whole day cost. So there can be a solution just like this for seafarers, some sort of a union or a welfare fund society provides for low cost boarding and lodging at a departure station. So it is an example. They provide for 100 rupees per day food and stay, and a very big center is operating of 600 persons capacity at Mumbai. The skill enhancement is there. Now, I just gave the example of PDOT. We have done this a part of a very big initiative of MEA that was started as a pilot in Mumbai and Delhi. So we POE Mumbai basically has been indigenously involved in this PDOT management, Pan-India PDOT management software online module, and we have been managing registration, booking, and certification of PDOT of emigrants. So it is stopped due to pandemic at around 14th of March. So till that time, from January 2018, we have provided PDOT to 94,000 immigrants till now, and a very big. We are basically in the process of moving the website to NIC server domain and with the website address of pdot.ma.gov.in. Now these are the just provisions of PBBY policy that I've been already shown. Now another issue that has basically again it has surfaced again in a big manner during post-COVID times. So housemates basically around 99% housemates are going either as an ECNR channel or through illegal channels. Hardly 1% to 2% goes through the legal channels. So, and one such method of securing ECNR passport is to send the women emigrants above 50 years, because more than 50 years by virtue of age you are ECNR category. So they are basically bypass all the security and welfare measures of government of India. Then I already told that bypassing the immigration process by traveling on visit visa and go to a third country on a visit visa, and then from there go to the destination country for on employment. With that, all the data is basically not captured. No data is captured of that housemate. So one of the solution, I am basically repeating the processes also, because basically here inherently if we come out with some solution in the processes, the redressal is achieved. So that is why I am repeating the processes. So misuse of it's basically ECNR category. One of the solution is like convert it into a mandatory ECR category like nurses. And another is that they are basically mandatorily go through state recruiting agents. And state recruiting agents structurally are basically not designed to handle the individual requirements, one or two or single individual domestic requirements. They can cater to the bulk requirements of companies. So all the individual domestic requirements of housemates are going through illegal channels. So either we can open to the private recruiting, licensed recruiting agents also, or there should be some methodology to stop this. So these are the PBBY policies settled in since 2010. So it has increased since we have been facilitating the claims filling portion of that, because generally the literacy level of the family members is very low, and so we have set up a special cell which facilitates the filling of the claim forms. So with that, it has increased in the last few years. So these are the general violations of Indian Immigration Act: unregistered agent, violations at immigration counters, forged immigration clearance, visa forgery, advertisement by unregistered agents in print media and on the social media. So this has also increased in the post-COVID times. Everybody has been advertising that large numbers of vacancies exist in Gulf or in Poland, but actually these are not true, and these are all fake advertisements. Overcharging, pushing, job racketing, and procedures to file FIR in each case is different. So one of the solution is to have a deep penetration of branch offices of licensed recruiting agents in the areas which are basically like UP, Bihar and Rajasthan, the basic contributors of the emigrants. But the ecosystem of migration exists in Mumbai, Delhi because of consulates, ticketing, all those things, and historically also previously they used to go by ship. So all the ecosystem exists in Mumbai, Delhi, but the immigrants are sourced from UP, Bihar, Rajasthan. So geographical divide, sub-agents and middlemen and illegal agents takes advantage. So we need to bridge this divide, and one of the method is to have a deep penetration of branch offices of licensed recruiting agents. Second is the mandatory pre-departure training of ECNR category. So thank you. These the other things I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that. That is indeed, it was very, very enlightening. And I think you've actually raised quite a lot of issues that would be very critical for us to look at from the perspective of a redress. And it would be great to hear how the Consul General of in the UAE would have thoughts on this. The question of the visit visa and the increasing number of visit visa and the change circumstances with the 5-year visit visa that UAE is now offering. And you have proposed a solution to it, which I think is an important proposition in terms of protection, just from a protection perspective. Because even if workers go there, they are, if they are not registered, of course, then they are sometimes denied the protection of the state, or they can get into situations where they cannot reach the state or the embassy. And so at the time of that change from a visit visa to a work visa, that might be one way of looking at it from a protection perspective. That might be one way of ensuring that workers have that access to redress. The question of an COVID and insurance policy kind of thing, I think that would be very, very important kind of thing. I'm wondering, though you've said it in the PBY, but I think I'm wondering if you also have thoughts on how it could be part of the employer's kind of, responsibility as well, because it can be seen as within the occupational health and safety kind of framework. What is very disturbing, of course, you have said about this 50-year-old woman now being pushed to go across for domestic workers. Normally, the trend was younger women and things like that, and underaged women and things like that. But to actually see that pushing of women over 50 years, that's quite disturbing, actually. So it would be great to get some thoughts on it. And then I would like both your thoughts. I'll come back to you, both of your thoughts, Council CGI and as well as Sir Rao. Both your thoughts on, when you think of protection, how do you see protection? As those who have gone through the system and therefore are eligible for protection, or do you see protection as irrespective of whether, so for example, visit visa people, and are they entitled to protection? Basically, is protection service that is offered irrespective of status? I'll come back to you all to get your thoughts on that. But before that, then let me ask Sir Jane to come in here. And I know that the communication plays a vital role, and you listen to a lot of those problems and take up a lot of these issues and try to address them as well. So is that possible for you to come in here and to give us some thoughts on how you perceive some of the issues on redress? Sir Jay?
Good afternoon, sir. I'm audible to you all, sir?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to thank Secretary, sir, for giving an opportunity to RSLDC to speak on the issue, because it is a very vital issue. And RSLDC being an nodal organization in Rajasthan for skilling and employing people, so our responsibility becomes multifold. Like we are at the employment department also, we are skilling people, then we are employing them also. In present scenario, what I like to suggest is, because emigrants and migration, migration is a big issue now in today's normal. Migrant people who are migrating within the country, they are also migrant people, so we have to address their problem also. For that, realizing this problem, our Honorable Chief Minister has taken a very good stance, and he has made a fund of 10 crore rupees and established a Rajasthan Pravasi Sumit Kalyan proposed in the state of Rajasthan. For that purpose, the people who are coming back from the different countries, and they are jobless and they're not getting any job over here. So what we have done is we have made a portal that is called Rajasthan portal, where all the migrant laborers can be registered for their job requirements. We are doing their skill mapping, and we are identifying what type of skills are required. If they want to be reskilled, upskill, or any type of skill if they want, then RSLDC is doing that job also. So we have identified a lot of people who needs skilling. That's why on our portal, 260,000 people have shown interest in skilling. And so far, we have mapped 58,000 people and provided a list of Government of India for skilling them so that they could be placed in the appropriate sector of their interest. So that is one of the good initiatives which our government has taken, because we are making a sort of arrangement where demand job seekers and placement providers can both meet and take the people right now. And in the from the overseas point of view, what I like to say is because being a organization, we are the first government organization in country who has taken the responsibility of establishing a PDOT center. We are running we are also a recruiting agent. We are also doing we are the member of ISC network. So a lot of responsibilities we are sharing. Whatever is the required for teaching skilling people and placing them out, we are all covering all the entire ambit. So present scenario for the welfare of migrants, our government has established exclusive cell that is called OPB, Overseas Placement Bureau, where we have made a kitty of some dedicated funds for the welfare of migrant workers. this year, again, government has stressed and want to strengthen this OPB cell to address the interests of migrant workers. That way, there are some initiatives we have taken for the for redressal mechanism. I like to tell you, sir, in our state we have initiated a step to form a state task force. That task force is supposed to comprise all the people from civil administration, police administration in every district. In Rajasthan, 10 districts are identified as the major labor sending district in the state. So we are focusing on those 10 districts, and we are making special attempts to provide a task force in those districts where illegal migration is taking place. As you all well know, sir, in the new Immigration Bill 2019, there's a provision of making the state responsible and taking responsibility of providing safe legal migration to the people. Here I'd like to suggest, sir, because RA is our first point where people has to be, migrant has to be educated. When our RA is not educated, then migrants cannot be educated, sir. Because RA is misleading them, they are not telling them the right information. If the RA is educated, a joint venture, and all the RAs of the country are, united, and they are being educated and tell about all the benefits provided to the people who are going abroad, that will be a very good idea, sir. What we can do is, I also suggest there is effort should be made in the direction of capacity building of our district administration and our police personnel, because they are not aware about the provisions which are available in the rules, what type of facility they can get, what type of facilities are there for redressal. Third thing, I like to suggest is because there is a lot of publicity needs to be made to make the people aware about the system which is existing. What is redressal mechanism? We don't have people do not know about the E-migrate portal. What is Mother portal? They are not aware. So publicity is required in that direction. And I'll request because Councillor sir is sitting in this participating in the discussion. I'd like to request you, sir, because the people who are in distress at different countries, destination countries, they are coming to embassies for redressal of their complaints. But so many times they are not attended properly because of the lack of communication, lack of their knowledge about the subject. So there should be a mechanism to establish a help desk so that they can be assisted by people in lodging their complaints. That may be one of the ideas which you can consider, sir, if you think it is appropriate. And the most of suggestions I have noted down. I'd like to say something. Sir, I've already discussed about the capacity building is an important aspect, because from the PDOT center, we have trained around 3,000 people in PDOT. We were the first PDOT but was established in the government capacity. We have trained 3,000 people. We are getting feedback from them on regular basis by a monitoring mechanism. So what I am personally, feeling and coming to know is, the people are not aware that, there's a lot of problems are there with them, sir. When they are abroad, they're not able to, go to the proper place. They go to the embassy, but embassies में जो problem आती है सर उन लोगों को, they generally used to discuss कि सर मैं embassy जाता हूँ, वहाँ पे मेरी complaint address नहीं होती है. This is not a sort of complaints that I'm making, but I'm telling you on the basis of interaction which I made with the people. So I'd like to request the embassy to take some step in the direction. We can go to the migrants who are suffering, suppose they are sitting in some camp and they're not able to come to the embassy, then we can ask them what type of help is required at their level. We can provide those help to them. That will be a good mechanism, sir.
And let's take a pause here, because it would be good to get some thoughts back from the CGI on this, sir. You've already mentioned of the systems that you have, but would you like to respond first to that question I said I put of in terms of irrespective of status, which Sir Jain has also said, and the whole possibility of, yes, sometimes infrastructure is there, but the accessibility is a problem. Would you like to respond to that?
Yes, sure, absolutely. As I had mentioned that, we have this concept called the Pravasi Bharatiya Sahayata Kendra, which was established 10 years ago. So it is an office which is meant to provide services to the workers. It has a 24/7 toll-free multilingual, helpline, and basically anyone can reach out to them 24/7 and in different languages: Malayalam, Telugu, Tamil, Hindi, English, all those languages one can, primarily, which is what the users require.
This is embassy staff manning it, or this is outsourced kind of thing?
Outsourced agency. It's an outsourced agency, and we've been successfully running this PBSK for the last 10 years.
Okay.
This was the first project of its kind in the world because of the fact that, in the UAE we have a large number of blue-collar workers. And I would say that this PBSK has been running very efficiently, very successfully in terms of at least providing all the information, support, advice. They also provide psychological counseling. They provide legal counseling. So if you need legal counseling, you can fix it up, and you can come and visit, and you can actually sit with the lawyer and get some advice. So that is also being managed since last 10 years. That's one. Secondly, as I mentioned, the Consulate of India in Dubai, about 7 telephone lines, 3 of them are 24/7. One is guest registration, one is for housemates, and there is another general 24/7 helpline, which is manned by our official, by our consulate official, 24/7. Then we have 4 more telephone lines which are available during the working hours. We have regular working hours, which these days are 8:30 to 5. And as I mentioned, that since the last 3 months, the Consulate of India Dubai works 365 days. So every single day, whenever it's a weekend or a holiday, our officials are available for at least 2 hours in the morning. People who call us late in the evening and request us for a death registration document, and they need to send the mortal remains back to India, which our people have been routinely doing out of working hours, on weekends, on holidays, obviously considering the sensitivity and the urgency of such requirements. So that is being done. Coming back to that, many times the Indian worker or any Indian national may visit the consulate, and the expectation may not be met. Sometimes you will appreciate that sometimes the expectations can go much more, beyond our abilities and our limit, which we can't address within our limited role. We have been doing the support in legal matters. We've been taking power of attorneys. We've been eventually getting the check after a year or 6 months, and then we've been sending it to the district magistrates for the final dispersal to the individuals. All that has been done. Few more points you asked a very important point that, there are people who are traveling on visit visa, then getting it converted into employment visa, and those who are traveling on an employment visa through our E-migrate system. The system has been working since 2014, as you know. So, done an analysis of how successful it is, and we do know that a large number of individuals who are potential employees here are bypassing the system, or the agents are making them bypass the system. For us, any Indian national is entitled to all the support which we can possibly render. So that's number one. Any Indian national without any documentation is entitled. Just to give a small example, the UAE authorities had amnesty schemes for visa overstay cases. So if you have overstayed your visa beyond a point, the UAE authorities gave a window that you can travel back to India, and we will be waiving off all your visa fines, which in some cases could be in few thousand dirhams as well. What we did was that to enable more and more Indian nationals to avail of that scheme, we launched a special drive in the months of September and October, and it's still continuing. If you don't have any documentation, you don't have a passport, you have nothing. If you are an Indian national, you can bring any document to us. So we started issuing emergency certificate, which, as you know, is a one-way travel document to enable an Indian citizen to travel back to India free of cost. That we've been doing. So just to give you a sense that, even if an individual is overstaying the visa, has no papers, not even a passport, so as soon as we go through our internal processing and we are able to ascertain the citizenship, and which we did in all cases eventually, which we were able to do.
So can I interrupt you here? This system of you giving this document to all irrespective of status, is this a separate department within the embassy that does this? Because like in the Philippines, the labor attaché will address all the cases of those who have the documents and things like that. But those who don't have documents, and there's a separate department within the consulate that that deals with what is called the program of assistance to nationals. So there are different people that deal with people with Filipino nationals that might have an issue of documents. Is that the same kind of structure, or is it all under one window?
A specific individual who deals with the issuance of emergency certificates. Yes, we do. But those applications can be made at any of our offices which are run by the service provider, right? Our service provider in the case of UAE is the BLS company, which provides services to many embassies, many Indian embassies worldwide. It's like you might know about BLS and you know about DFS, the outsourced service providers. So the applications can be made at the BLS center. Internally, our dedicated official will address those cases. It takes a while. It takes about 3 to 4 weeks for us to get the police verification done to the concerned state governments and state police departments in India. But eventually, we were able to issue those documents to individuals. And just to give you an example of the fact that any Indian national with or without documentation, the best possible service which the consulate can provide, and that is true for all embassies and consulates of India worldwide.
Thank you. Let me. I'll put a question to all the three of you and then I'll go to the migrant workers themselves who will speak. But a very quick response from the three of you is. And it's fantastic that all these systems are in place, kind of thing. But we do know, and just by the fact of sheer numbers, kind of thing, it's impossible at any given time to be addressing all the issues that come. And so therefore, some countries, Philippines, for example, Nepal, for example, they have resorted to working with community organizations, with civil society organizations and things. And there's a active kind of collaboration between community, civil society, government and things like that. Is that something that is formally done within your redressal mechanisms, or is it is there scope for it? Let me start with you first, Sir, the Consul General. Then I'll ask Sir Sao.
Yes. So I must just put on record our deep appreciation for all the Indian community associations here. We have some very, very strong associations which have been set up here for the last 30-40 years, right? Because of the very large community. And I must say that several individuals who are doing extremely well as entrepreneurs and who are professionals and the CSR funds of the companies, etc. And of course, humanitarian-minded individuals who give their time and energy as social workers. So we have some fantastic organizations here. Just to give you a sense that in Dubai, we have the consulate, and the consulate takes care of 6 emirates. One is Dubai, the other is Sharjah, Ajman, Fujairah, Al Quwain. And what we are able to do is that we have, for example, the Indian Association Sharjah. We have the Indian Relief Association in Ajman. We have an organization in Fujairah. We have one in Al Quwain, right? So we are able to reach out to them and connect with them to be able to provide services and support to all our nationals, and especially during the COVID period. For example, in provision of food, in provision of accommodation. We have the KMCC, which has, in fact, KMCC is, basically run by the diaspora from Kerala mainly, and they have branches in different emirates. So you can imagine the Indian Association, they have their branches, presence in different emirates, and they have done some fantastic work with us, and independently. So we collaborated with them in many ways, and we do that worldwide.
Perfect.
So
Perfect.
That is the thing. And if you ask me that is it formal enough, I won't be able to really respond to that. But what I can say is that, for example, sending.
No, I mean, are they registered? These would be organizations registered with the embassy. You would have some kind of a.
We don't have an empanel or a registration process per se. So it's like some of them have a registration by the UAE regulators, who regulate the working of such organizations like as charitable organizations, basically regulating the way they can raise funding, etc., etc. So we don't go into that because we are not like, the regulator here in the UAE, if you know what I'm trying to say. We are a diplomatic entity. But as long as an Indian association is willing to support the Indian nationals, we work with all of them.
Perfect. Thank you. And Sir Sao, at your level?
Yeah, actually, we have a concept of the offices of Protector of Emigrants at 13 places all across India. And specifically, it covers all, all the states and basically the center of migrants. So in last year, we have new POE offices opened at Patna, Guwahati, and Bengaluru, apart from the 10 existing offices. So we have got a POE offices at 13 locations under Protector General of Emigrants at New Delhi, and a strong network of around 1,500 licensed recruiting agents all across all over India, and their branch offices. So the basic premise, yeah, please.
I was asking, do these offices collaborate with civil society organizations or trade unions and things like that?
Yeah, basically that's why these offices are basically designed as an ear and eyes and ears to listen to the grievances of the immigrants, and whatever available mechanisms are there with the government of India and MEA to support the immigrants to, and like an example of it's a PDOT, it's basically a very great initiative by MEA to empower the immigrants in themselves so that they do not fall into the trap and they go as an जो सुरक्षित जाए, प्रशिक्षित जाए, विश्वास के साथ जाए, जो concept है, वो basically the whole PDOT concept is to strengthen that concept. So that is our network. Thank you.
Perfect. So for the sake of time, let me go to the two migrant workers who are with us and ask them first their views on how they have seen these operations of redress. And I'll ask Virendra Kumar first to take the floor. Virendra?
Dinesh, can you help us connect with the migrant workers, RSLDC? Atif and Dinesh, can we get connected to the migrant workers?
Mr. Dheeraj? Mr.
वो माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स जो बोल रहे हैं हमें सुनाई नहीं दे रहा.
1 minute.
मेरा नाम अमानत है.
आप थोड़ा उनके पास लेट लेंगे, माइक कैमरा थोड़ा नीचे करेंगे. हाँ, अभी बोलिए आप. जोर से बोलिए.
बेरिन गए थे, अजी बेरिन गए थे. ये एक बेरिन गए थे, बेरिन से और वापसी जो है भेज दिया गया इनको. पासपोर्ट रख लिया था, गए थे, पासपोर्ट उसी के पास था, फिर बाद में रिटर्न इसको वापसी कर दिया और अच्छी तरह से अभी क्या बताएं अभी आपको. और सब हाँ जो है ना अभी है, ये पैसे भर के गए थे, पैसे भी पूरे नहीं हुए और मैं इसका पिताजी लगता हूँ और मैं जो है ना पैसे भर रहे थे, वो पैसे भी कर्ज के तौर से ब्याज से ही उठा के दिया था, लेकिन क्या करें, गरीब आदमी मजदूर आदमी है. इसके लिए तो जो है ना रिक्वेस्ट हो आपसे, जो इच्छा भी हो सके तो ना कोई बात. हाँ हाँ
So obviously this is a case that and this is a migrant worker in distress, Survi. From what I understand, he is talking about some documents.
He's saying that he went to Bahrain and his passport was kept, and that he took loan to go, and he's in great distress. But he was not also paid adequately. That was the point made by the migrant.
Yes, and it is good that, I mean, it's a live case that has come on this call, so it might be good as an outcome of this webinar itself to see how this case will be addressed, because I see RSLDAC is in touch with the migrant worker, so it might be, so he is asking for assistance, and I guess we should try to see how to be able to understand that case and address it. But can you ask him if he has approached the embassy or anything like that?
Yes. दिनेश, ये अमानत अली एम्बेसी को अप्रोच किया था इन्होंने? हाँ जी, आपने किया था एम्बेसी को अप्रोच?
एम्बेसी का ये नया आदमी था, इसको कुछ बोलना चाहना इसका वो सही नहीं है, इसलिए तो मेरे को बोलना पड़ रहा।
नहीं, वहाँ भारतीय दूतावास जो था बहरीन में, आपने उनको संपर्क करने की कोशिश की थी, या आपको कोई नंबर पता था जिसको फोन करना है परेशानी होने पर?
नहीं, ऐसे कोई नंबर नहीं थे, ये पढ़ा लिखा नहीं है और इस तरीके से कुछ भी नहीं कर सका, जैसे भी था इस तरीके से ये आ गया वापस।
तो क्या काम करने गए थे बहरीन?
ये मजदूरी में गया था।
लेबर के तौर पे गए थे?
हाँ,
लेबर
मजदूर था, काम क्या था, क्या दिया, कैसे करवाया, क्या था, ऐसे तो चलता ही है।
कौन से आरए के थ्रू गए थे आप? किसके जरिए गए थे? RSLDC के जरिए गए थे? कैसे गए थे बहरीन?
एजेंट के थ्रू गए थे मैम। ये
विच
एजेंट के थ्रू गए थे। सिक्कर का एजेंट है या बम्बई का भी है, अब वो दोनों मिलके काम किया।
So William, he's saying that he didn't know the numbers of the embassy. The person is not very educated, and he went through a sub-agent.
Yeah, I know. No, Surbi, my suggestion is that obviously this is a Indian migrant worker in distress, and he's got a challenge with regard to. It seems like he might be stranded in some way without salary and things like that. It might be good to see how we can find how the RSLDC can put him in touch with the embassy or the support systems that we've been hearing about in this conference, in this meeting at the moment.
We can move forward because we've heard what is the level of awareness that the person had when he went.
And also, and I think the person who is assisting also doesn't seem to have doesn't seem to know how to go about his case, in the sense of where to bring him, like to the embassy or to the consulate and things like that. Can you ask him once again if the person assisting him, if he himself knows how to get to the embassy or to the ambassador or consulate?
They are returnee, William. They are in India right now.
Okay, but can you ask them if they knew how to get there then?
अच्छा, दिनेश, आपने इनको बताया एम्बेसी के थ्रू कैसे, एम्बेसी से कैसे संपर्क किया जा सकता है जब ये बाहर जाते हैं? हेलो
जी, प्लीज बताइए।
आपने इनको समझाया, आतिफ, आपने इनको समझाया कि एम्बेसी से कैसे संपर्क करते हैं?
यस मैडम, सारी चीजें उनको बताई हुई है मैडम, कि आपको कहाँ संपर्क करना है। कि डिस्ट्रेस में आपको इनको हैंडबुक दी जाती है, उसके अंदर फोन नंबर्स होते हैं एम्बेसीज के, और उसके अलावा एड्रेसेस भी एम्बेसीज के, उससे कांटेक्ट कर सकते हैं. ऊपर से
No, that's
PBS
good.
की हेल्पलाइन.
And that's good. And that's the information that we get. But it would be good. Is it possible to ask him if he knows how to use that? Can he give us a response? That would be really nice to see.
धीरज जी इनसे पूछिए जरा कि उन्होंने कभी कांटेक्ट करने की कोशिश करी क्या एम्बेसीज से, वहां से रिस्पांस क्या मिला?
कांटेक्ट करने की कोशिश करी क्या आपने? ये कुछ भी नहीं जानता भैया, कंपनी है, पढ़ा लिखा है नहीं और कंपनी के बारे में भी ये कुछ भी नहीं जानता. और जो एजेंट था उसने इसको वहां पे भेज दिया था और उसके बाद में ये वापस से रिटर्न हो गया था 8 से 9 महीने में.
All right. So obviously, I think they are returned. So it would be good to go into a deeper understanding of the issue as you talk to them. But and I think Ambassador CG, this is exactly what it is. I think on the ground level, and this is across the board in so many situations across different nationalities. You would get a large portion or a significant portion of the population of migrant workers that, despite going through all this information and things like that, somehow are not able to kind of use it. And so the redress mechanisms that we have in place, the infrastructure is there, but the navigation of that infrastructure to use it is sometimes missing. And to look at how do we make this more accessible. Accessibility is not from our perspective, but from perspectives like this, where workers who are probably not educated or have not had a chance to get educated, and sometimes it's even with educated workers kind of thing, not having time to go through that training properly in a proper perspective. But this was, I think, a good example for us to see some of the gaps in how we go, how the infrastructure that we have in place. I'll ask from the floor. Let me give some question and answers from the floor. And I've seen there are a number of questions about saying that people should go to the registered process and about complaints and all. But let me see, is there anybody who's from the floor wants to ask a quick question?
I'm Dr. Suresh Mumbai.
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Suresh.
Sir, it was indeed a nice discussion. Thank you very much for taking this initiative, respected CGI and the POEs and officials of ICM. Okay, HRS are providing an employment average 2 million people and every year. Now, approximately 9 million people starting in the 3.4 million people in UAE. The number of them is less than 0.1, which is considered to be the importance of which we deal. After Mr. Sahu said, actually received from the illegal, the people traveling around the illegal channel. The main threat is the illegal agents who are the real culprits behind the majority of the complaints. Government of India should have a mechanism to combat illegal activities. And we have to defend the role of FAs, HRIs, immigrants. The roles and responsibilities of individuals is very important, and we need to equip with adequate staff to have a separate cell for protector of immigrants to handle these immigrant issues. And one more, sir, irrespective of the ECNR and ECR candidates, it should be routed through the registered recruitment agencies and made compulsory E-migrate registration and all. And insurance should be made compulsory for all the people traveling abroad, so that we can able to minimize this complaints and all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And those are some good recommendations that you have given to see how to protect. Can we take another one? I see.
Can I ask a question to the Consul General at Dubai, please?
Who is this?
My name is Praveena. I work at the Center for Development Studies.
Please,
Trivandrum.
Please go ahead.
Yes. So, okay. In his presentation, he had said that about 10,000 immigrants were repatriated free of cost during the COVID period. I would like to know how many of these were women in the ECR category. And the second question is for him only is what kind of information do we have about domestic workers, whether there have been complaints from them during the COVID period, or are we aware that actually domestic workers have not lost their jobs during the COVID period? So these are the two questions that I have. Thank you.
Williams, this is Swami from OMCAP. How are you?
Mr. Swami, it would be good if we can just have the question.
Yes, madam, I think
We'll quickly take Swami, Sita, Shabri, and then we can give the floor back.
Yeah, there is one migrant here. Can you hear?
Swami, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, my question, okay. See, after COVID, the things have changed. The recruitment will not be like this anymore. Maybe there will be issues from the point of safety, from the point of health. So the demands of employers will be much more. So in safeguarding the interest of the migrant, we may have to be ready ourselves. It will be not only pre-departure orientation training, but it can be also after arrival training. I think that will help you.
That's an important. That's a very good point. Very good point. Post-arrival training, and I know that some countries looking at this as well. So thanks for that. But I like your analysis as well that the demand will increase. That's very interesting. Let me take one more question. I see Shabri Nair from the ILO.
Thank you so much, William. My name is Shabri Nair, and I'm from the International Labour Organization. I'm the Regional Migration Specialist for South Asia, based in Delhi. What an absolute pleasure it has been listening to specifically the inputs. All the panelists were great, but specifically the inputs from CGI in the UAE and South, the POE. And the reason why I mention that is because I feel more humbled. I feel more humbled beginning to understand how much more complicated the situation is for the government of India, for the Ministry of External Affairs officials. And this is going back to the point that William was making across the spectrum. The spectrum being from both sending side, which is Mr. Sao's role, and the receiving side, which is the CGI's role. So, I also look at it this way. On the 9th of July, Secretary Bhattacharya, under his leadership, the government of India organized, MEA took the lead in organizing a regional consultation, bringing together Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, all four countries, to discuss evacuation and repatriation of migrants in times of COVID-19. And it was very well received because in that very same conversation, CGI Sir, Mr. Jain, the Secretary mentioned about the importance of bilateral labor agreements. Because it's very clear from listening to what you have to say from the Dubai perspective, all the Emirates that you covered just as Consulate General, the importance of making that link to all kinds of issues in the country of destination, but also relating to the country of destination itself, because none of these could be solved without bringing in the country of destination perspective. I'm curious to know, sir, from you, given that, do you think we could, under India's leadership, organize something along these lines, maybe even at the national level, just experience sharing? Because there's so much that India has to offer. Like you were saying, PBSK, the first that the system has instituted in the world, Mother as a portal, as a legal grievance addressing portal, the first of its kind in South Asia. So when we have something along these lines, do you see the possibility of getting India to lead these conversations, also from country of destination side, which will be helpful for us to take some of these things forward from our side? No, thank you very much. Really appreciate your moderation.
That's good. That's good, and that's a good point to see. Yes, of course, gives a reason for leadership kind of thing, just because you're handling that sheer number. But let me come to Sita. Do you want do you have a question as well?
Yeah, actually, I'm trying to just raise a question which is a little bit on the origin side. And this is really about looking at social security for migrants. So while we're looking at the spectrum, and I'm glad Ramu sir brought this up right in the beginning, but at origin, we also need to look at social security, whether when they come back, especially because not all migrants are rich. Not all migrants have access to all the, schemes. And I think it's going to be really critical to link some of this up. I know this doesn't fall under MEA. I also know that this could be a state subject in some areas, but I think it is absolutely critical that we think through that entire spectrum and that we look at mechanisms that actually support migrants across the whole space. I also have just one or two other points to make. One is regarding insurance, and this has been a conversation that we've been having with actually the recruiters for a while. But I think it's quite important that we look at an insurance that actually somehow covers when one goes to another country, not just the way PBBY does. We experimented with the Andhra government and we managed to get all migrants, irregular, regular, anybody, any status, to actually get covered by the insurance. And I think that would be key. It doesn't matter what your status is. It doesn't matter if you got clearance or not. You are still eligible for an insurance. And I think that would be very important to work towards and to look at strengthening insurance in that manner. And there's one very, very good practice that I have learned from one of the recruiters who's sending people. And this is that they create one leader amongst a group of people who might be going to either the same country, if possible to the same, employer sometimes. And that is what Sao Saab was saying before when giving the example of the seafarers and the idea of the union of the seafarers, which actually provides this kind of support. I actually think that if we create some level of leadership even amongst the migrants, so that one in a group that is going together actually knows better the systems, knows the officials a little bit, knows who to contact, then there might be links that are stronger for the migrants themselves.
Good point. Good points. And definitely, I think one of the points worth following up on is this, and we have learned this now in COVID more than any other lesson if we have learned, it is the lesson of social protection for migrant workers, even when those who are returning kind of thing. And that is so important to put to consider. Thank you so much. Let me go back to the panel now. We have run out of time, but I'll start with you, sir, CGIF India, please.
Yes, thank you so much. Just like to mention that, of course, we do work with all key stakeholders. The UAE government is the key stakeholder for us. And I think we must appreciate one thing, that, it's also important to look at this entire migration in a larger perspective, right? So we like I said, that India is able to, support the migration for about 2.2 to 2.4 million workers to the UAE. And, like we spoke about the remittances, it speaks about their livelihood and the livelihood for their family. We must acknowledge and appreciate the fact that UAE has been very welcoming for the Indian community, as also for workers from different nationalities. More than 200 nationalities come and live and work in the UAE. And it is truly a shining example for the world. We have seen that some of the countries, I wouldn't like to name them, have actually indicated that they would like to reduce the dependence on expats. And you can appreciate what that would mean on a larger context. You see, we have to also understand at the same time, as economies are being devastated by COVID, and we do look forward to the next 6 to 9 months, perhaps a year, being very stressful period for economies, and companies facing bankruptcy and closure. So obviously, people coming back to India will also be, facing more difficulty in getting new employment and fresh employments. So we have to keep everything in perspective. And I would also like to say, yes, we as governments, the two governments work very closely. We talk about coordination. We talk about our E-migrate system being linked with their Ministry of Human Resource Development. We are having those discussions. Yes, India as the country with 1.38 billion people, we are and we will remain a very valuable and significant contributor to the world when it comes to top quality human resource and human resources of all kinds. And in the words of Prime Minister Modi, our Indian community in different countries is the living bridge which connects India and our friendly countries all over the world. And especially in the COVID, we have seen, looking at the healthcare workers here, disproportionate number of healthcare workers in the UAE are from India. So most people have had a very, very useful and productive engagement, let's say, with a nursing professional from Kerala or somebody who has come from Telangana or from UP or from Bihar. So I think it's a very important connect. We have to understand that when we are looking at grievance redressal, we have to appreciate that the large number of Indian workers here are able to make a good living for themselves and their families. That's how we create the largest remittances in the world, close to $80 billion a year, which is very.
So if you could quickly address, the question on the domestic workers that our sister put.
The domestic workers, you mean the household people?
Yes, the question that was put by.
So we, from the ICWF funds, we supported the travel back of more than 500 individuals at our cost. Disproportionate number of those seats did go to the housemates. The Dubai office also runs a shelter for distressed women, where we are able to accommodate about 10 to 20 women at any given point of time. So if there is somebody who is under severe distress and we need to organize the paperwork for her to be supported to travel back to India, for those, let's say about 4 to 5 days or 7 days, whatever period by which we are organizing the paperwork, etc., we do host them at our shelter at our cost. That is what we are doing. We do get the support of a large number of Indian community organizations. Like I said earlier, there are Indian women's group, there are social organizations, and everybody went all out. And I must add just one small point. Many of the individuals, they came to me, they said, well, we are the Indian Association Ajman, but people from different nationalities came to us. They said, well, I'm not an Indian, but I need your help. And obviously, no one was turned back. I must add, not a single person was turned back that, sorry, you're not an Indian, this is an Indian organization.
That is true.
As part of the larger family was supported. And thank you so much. And we will definitely take up Mr. Nair's suggestion, and we will see how India can drive this conversation. We have to respect the fact that, a worker sending country and a worker receiving country may have certain different, priorities, etc., etc. And like I said, in this country, UAE, the Emirati citizens are actually 11% of the population. 89% are the expats. So, you have to be sensitive to the demographies and the current status. You have to be appreciative of the fact that, UAE has been very, very welcoming to our Indian community. Thank you.
Sir, can I just ask you one very quick follow-up question? If you have a figure at the top of your head of how many power of attorneys you have been able to get during this time of COVID?
So
do you have a figure?
To give you a figure that recently in the last few months, we sent about 250 checks which we received from 250 checks which we received from the employers, which was a process of the legal case. Eventually, they were getting the compensation, and we sent all those checks back to India through the different district magistrates. Currently, we are looking at a specific case where there are 1,500 workers. Most of them, we presume, are of Indian origin. The employer is also Indian, but unfortunately, the companies will prorate our time, and we might be supporting all of these individuals to file a case at our cost. As I mentioned, that we have already spoken to lawyers who will be willing to fight cases on our behalf for the Indian nationals at our cost.
Good. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So now, you want to come in here? Concluding remarks? Very quickly.
Yeah, I will just respond to Cheetah Madam's suggestion regarding the policy. Basically, it's not only the question of the umbrella coverage of all the citizens, Indian citizens going abroad, but to operate the claims, if you see, you need to have a data already. It's not that you come up with some data afterwards. So ultimately, the whole challenge comes out to be basically how to capture the data. Whether it's very basic data, and to cover all the immigrants, at least in some format, either they should fill the data themselves or through recruiting agent or some other methodology. The challenge basically comes into the traceability and the data capturing. Basic data, then we will be able to do not many things. We will be able to provide many welfare measures already available to them. Thank you.
And thank you for that. I think there is a lot of scope for improvement in there, and we've seen that in the course of this discussion of just the numbers flowing. So how do you systematize this kind of and manage this number and data to see what kind of services are being offered and how they could be improved and made better. So thank you for raising that point consistently about the need for looking at how to plot this data systematically and capture it properly so that services can be rendered. So Jane?
Yeah. So I'd like to congratulate for this tremendous, effort in bringing the Vande Mataram people. So many people were, rescued from the different countries. So that is a very good, I should congratulate Ministry and all the officials who are involved in that and that is only my thing, sir. I like to say that process should be smoothened and, it should have been, because it is made for the workers who can understand in a better way. If people are not able to understand the complications of the system, the system should be very, streamlined and very, simple term. They should be able to understand. That is my suggestion only. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And now I come to Pepe. If you want to come in here and say what you've heard and what you think are some of the things that can move further on from an all-of-society approach in terms of giving a redress to migrant workers, both in terms of state infrastructure but also social infrastructure. Pepe?
Thank you very much, and thank you for this session. It's been very informative for me as well, and I fully second what Chabarinari was saying earlier about the sharing opportunity with other governments, because many of the issues raised here today are very similar with the other countries in the region. Whether we're talking about migrants returning in debt, increasing risk of irregular migration and economic downturn, increasing desperation to take very irregular routes and victims of trafficking. There's also been some issues around improved migration management, around negotiating perhaps a better visa regime to respond to crisis situations. Would there be a mechanism through which these overstay visas can be waived, not just in the UAE, but globally in situations like these? So I think there is strength in a collective practice sharing as well as negotiation, and this is something that I would like India to very strongly participate in and show examples through what you've done and what you've learned. The scale of the operations in India is also humbling in terms of numbers, but of course when you start operating at this scale you do inevitably run into some quality issues as well, and I think that's where working with the civil society, working on building capacities, looking at monitoring and evaluation tools, looking at how to improve accountability to the migrants through civil society and these mechanisms is something quite interesting and something that we could also certainly work together on going ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Pepe, and that's a good point to consider for a future webinar. Subri, I'll put this out to you now to think of a future webinar where we can actually talk about that, about how community organizations, diaspora organizations, civil society, and state work together and look at different examples kind of thing of where this is happening. We can look at the India level kind of thing in the different countries of destination, how this configures or how it plays out, because political social context differs from country to country. We can look at it like that, as in how India manages this, or we can even look at it as different countries and have a conversation on this, and we'd be happy to see how to be part of that, or how to bring that in. But thank you so much, and sir, for the UAE, just this opportunity of leadership to say that the GFMD, the Global Forum on Migration and Development next year, is going to happen in the UAE. Of course, if COVID allows us, we will have a face-to-face meeting, otherwise it will be online. So this might be a fantastic opportunity for India to talk about what it has done and share around some of the themes that will be discussed on skills. We heard just now on skills. We've heard on protection. We've heard on engagement in response to undocumented workers, irregular workers. So it might be good to consider how we want to contribute to that discussion, because of course India is not only a big player in the UAE in that sense, but in the entire Gulf region. And you are right, and there are a lot of lessons to be learned and exchanged. So it will be fantastic to see. So Sav, I think I've seen you in Abu Dhabi dialogue sessions before, if I'm not mistaken. So it's and of course I see I'm taking this opportunity to say bye to some of the friends I've met before, kind of Swami sir as well, who it's good to see you, and it's good to see you after a long time and online. But thank you so much, Subri. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity as well. It's lovely working with ICM. I've had the opportunity of knowing you all when you all started, so it's a nice reconnect. But thank you so much. It's been a wonderful discussion. It's been very enlightening, and I hope we can see how we can continue to strengthen these processes, wherein we can, the sharing is just helpful to see what we can take forward. So I must say, from my perspective as a regional coordinator of a civil society movement, it has been very enlightening. Thank you so much all for your patience, even if you have gone over time. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, William. Some of the points that were raised today, we are looking at carrying the discussion forward and organize more such consultations going ahead. So the point made is well taken care of. And on behalf of ICM, I would like to thank our Joint Secretary, Shri Abbagani Ramu, to the Consul General of India, Dubai, who was so generous with his time and answered all the queries, the esteemed panel, Pepi, Sisao, RK Jain, the migrant workers, and last but not the least to you, William, for efficiently moderating today's discussion and bringing out many of the points that we sought to cover when we began the discussion. So thank you, everyone, and we'll hope to take the discussions forward. Before we close today, I'll just request, as is our practice, so that everyone can turn on their camera so that we can take a virtual snap, and then we'll close.